This is Bermuda, a solitary slab of rock sitting in the middle of the open ocean with no rivers, no freshwater springs, and almost nothing in the way of natural resources. Battered from every direction by ferocious storms, cut off on all sides by endless water, Bermuda should be a hard place to survive on. And yet, it is one of the richest territories on the planet. Home to over 60,000 residents who enjoy one of the highest standards of living anywhere on Earth. What makes this even stranger is where that wealth comes from. Not oil, not gold, not mines buried beneath the ground. Bermuda built its fortune by taking the world's hurricanes, earthquakes, and catastrophes and turning them into a business worth billions of dollars a year. Say the word Bermuda, and most people picture a Caribbean getaway. That's not where it is. Bermuda is a British overseas territory sitting entirely alone out in the North Atlantic, so far from any other landmass that it barely has a neighbor to speak of. The territory is made up of roughly 7 principal islands and well over 100 smaller islets and rocks. Yet altogether, they add up to just over 50 square kilometers of land. The closest point on the mainland is Cape Hatteras on the American coastline, more than 1,000 kilometers to the west. And that's just the beginning of how isolated this place really is. Head east instead, and you would sail nearly 5,000 kilometers of open Atlantic before ever spotting the coast of Morocco. In between, there's nothing. No island chains to break up the crossing, no bridges, no shortcuts. Just wind, waves, and horizon in every direction. Every person, every parcel, every connection to anywhere else has to cross that enormous stretch of sea to get there. It's fair to wonder how a place this remote ever got settled at all, or even how it got its name. The story goes back to a shipwreck in 1609 when a storm drove the English vessel Sea Venture straight into the reefs surrounding the islands. The crew who made it ashore found nothing waiting for them. No rivers, no lakes, not a single source of drinkable water anywhere. Just a bare limestone rock, alone in the Atlantic. And yet that shipwreck became the opening chapter of one of history's great tales of survival turned prosperity. Before we go further, tell us in the comments, what time is it right now where you're watching from, and which country are you tuning in from? Now settle in, and let's dig into the story of how Bermuda. Turquoise shallows, dazzling white coastline, a picture of calm. But that calm sits on top of a process that took tens of millions of years to build. Bermuda didn't just appear out of nowhere. It's the exposed peak of an enormous underwater volcano, one whose base sits more than 4,300 meters down on the floor of the North Atlantic. That volcano was born from a geological hotspot somewhere between 30 and 35 million years ago. Once it went dormant, the ocean took over the shaping. Coral began building reefs around the old volcanic rock, and layer after layer of shell and marine sediment piled on top, eventually hardening into a limestone shell nearly 60 meters thick that blankets the whole island today. But that gift came with a catch, a geological trade-off harsh enough to have wiped out any less determined settlers. Because limestone is so porous, Bermuda has no natural fresh water to speak of at all. People stayed anyway, and over time, they figured out how to bend this unforgiving rock to their will, building one of the wealthiest, most polished island destinations in the world out of a place that started with nothing to offer. To understand how Bermuda got rich, you have to look at the water around it first. The island sits inside the Sargasso Sea, the only sea on Earth that isn't bordered by any coastline. Instead, it's defined purely by 4 huge ocean currents circling around it. The most important of those is the Gulf Stream, which pushes warm water north and keeps Bermuda noticeably warmer than anywhere else at the same latitude. That warmth is a gift. Visibility in the water can stretch to 60 meters, and the coral reefs here grow further north than anywhere else on the planet. But sitting exposed in the open Atlantic cuts both ways. It also puts Bermuda squarely in the path of hurricane season, year after year. Even so, that same tough geological base has let the island absorb storm after storm and keep standing. Scattered across this island are stories you won't find anywhere else. Take Horseshoe Bay, arguably Bermuda's most famous beach, known worldwide for its rose-tinted sand. For years, people assumed the color came from crushed red coral. The real explanation is stranger. The pink comes from a tiny reef-dwelling organism called Homotrema rubrum, which carries a red shell. Parrotfish eat these creatures, grind their shells into fine fragments, and those fragments blend into the white sand, giving the beach its signature blush. The surface isn't where Bermuda's strangeness ends either. More than 300 shipwrecks rest on the seafloor around the island, making it one of the planet's premier wreck diving destinations. Hidden reefs and the island's spot along major shipping lanes doomed countless vessels over the centuries. Today, those wrecks have become part of the reef system itself, covered in coral, home to new generations of marine life. And while the ocean keeps its own record of the past, there's an entirely different world hiding underground. Step into Crystal Cave and the daylight disappears fast, replaced by something that took nature roughly 30,000 years to build, dating back to the last ice age, when rainwater seeping through the limestone slowly deposited the minerals that form the cave's brilliant white stalactites. Walk through it today, and you'll find glittering crystal formations, ancient stone columns, and a mirror-still underground lake. The kind of scene that feels lifted straight out of a fairy tale. Between a beach colored by microscopic sea creatures, ships resting on the ocean floor, and caves carved out over tens of thousands of years, Bermuda makes one thing clear. How impressive a place is has nothing to do with its size. Here's Bermuda's great irony. Water is everywhere around the island, and none of it is fit to drink. Even wells dug deep into the ground only turn up brackish water, tainted by seawater working its way through the porous limestone below. In the middle of a vast ocean, the one resource people can't live without isn't the seawater surrounding them. It's the rare rainfall that drops from the sky. There are no rivers cutting across the island, no lakes to draw from. The limestone that makes up Bermuda lets rain sink straight into the ground instead of pooling on the surface the way it does most other places, which means every single rainstorm actually matters here. Somewhere else, rain is just weather. On this island, every drop that falls has to be caught before the ground swallows it whole. Fly over Bermuda's hillsides, and you'll notice thousands of gleaming white roofs, a sight that stands out more than any skyline ever could. That look isn't decorative. It's the product of generations of quiet trial and error. When rain falls, it runs down a series of stepped limestone ridges built into each roof, channels into narrow grooves, and drains down into a storage tank hidden beneath every house. In a place where water has always been precious, each drop gets caught and saved right at the source, so essential to daily life that it's actually written into building codes. Every new home is legally required to have a water tank size to match its roof area. None of this was dreamed up in a lab. It came from generations of people paying close attention, understanding they couldn't reshape the island, only learned to work with it. Even the blinding white finish on the roofs serves a purpose. The limestone reflects sunlight, which keeps the collected water cleaner and the house underneath cooler. And the sheer weight of the stone tiles helps the roof hold together when hurricane season rolls around. Most places, a roof is just shelter. In Bermuda, it's the starting point of the entire water supply. Proof of how a community turned one of nature's harshest limitations into the backbone of a comfortable life. As morning light hits those white rooftops, Bermuda wakes up at a pace most places forgot long ago. No traffic jams, no blaring horns. just waves rolling against limestone cliffs and the smell of salt air drifting through narrow neighborhood streets. Distances here are short enough that commuting to work, school runs, or a trip to the corner shop often takes only minutes by bike, with plenty of time left over to wave at someone you know along the way. Since 1951, Bermudian law has limited each household to a single car, and visitors aren't allowed to rent private vehicles at all. A restriction that was decades ahead of anywhere else that eventually considered limiting traffic. So instead of engines roaring down the roads, what you hear is the quiet buzz of scooters weaving between trees, punctuated by a ferry horn as it shuttles passengers across water so clear it barely looks real. In a place where most people grew up knowing each other, small things, a greeting on the sidewalk, a chat with a shopkeeper, a hand offered when it's needed, are still just part of everyday life, even as bigger cities elsewhere have largely lost that habit. When the workday ends, plenty of people head straight back to the water, whether that's casting a line, taking a boat out, or just sitting quietly and watching the horizon they have known since they were kids. For Bermudians, the ocean was never a wall keeping them apart from the rest of the world. It's the place holding most of their memories. Of course, island life this small comes with real trade-offs. Everything has to arrive by sea. The land can't grow, and everyone learns early to think twice before using up anything they have. It's hard to picture now, but Bermuda started with almost nothing going for it economically. No farmland worth mentioning, no minerals underground, no natural resources to build an economy on. Those exact limitations forced Bermudians to look elsewhere for opportunity. Rather than treat the surrounding ocean as a wall, they turned it into a road. Sitting roughly between North America and Europe, Bermuda naturally became a waypoint along transatlantic shipping routes. Local shipwrights designed the Bermuda sloop, built from native cedar, a wood light enough and rot-resistant enough to outperform comparable European vessels of the time. Across the 1700s alone, islanders built close to 1,000 of these ships, using them to haul salt from the Turks Islands and sell it at a profit in North American ports. What started as an isolated speck in the Atlantic slowly turned into a bridge connecting continents, and the story didn't stop with shipbuilding. As the world moved on, Bermudians kept looking for the next industry that actually fit their strengths, rather than clinging to resources the island had simply never had. It's proof that wealth doesn't always start with what's in the ground. Sometimes it starts with recognizing the value in what's already sitting right in front of you. In Hamilton, Bermuda's capital, zoning rules cap every building at a height below the cathedral tower, which keeps the entire financial district low-rise and painted in the same soft pastels as the rest of the city, just steps from the water. But inside those unassuming buildings, financial professionals sign contracts worth billions of dollars every single day, ensuring against disasters most of them will never personally witness. That's the reinsurance industry. Essentially insurance for insurance companies, the financial backstop that helps insurers absorb the cost of major hurricanes, catastrophes, and global-scale disasters. Bermuda's position between North America and Europe, paired with centuries of maritime trade experience, helped it become a hub trusted by international insurers. Today, this tiny island handles more than a third of the entire global reinsurance market. supplies more catastrophe coverage to American insurers than any other jurisdiction on Earth, and oversees roughly $1.5 trillion in assets. A place that once had to ration every drop of rain to survive dry spells, now helps ensure the entire world against disaster. Wealth you'll never see or dig out of the ground, yet strong enough to support an entire nation. Surrounded by international finance, global business, and modern infrastructure, Bermuda has still held on to something no amount of development could replace: its own identity. Walk the island's streets, and you'll notice something distinctive almost immediately. Bermudian men in full business attire, dress shirt, tie, blazer, paired with knee-length shorts and tall socks. These are Bermuda shorts, and they trace back to the late 1800s, when British military officers stationed on the island asked to have their trousers cut short to deal with the heat. By the 1920s, Hamilton businessmen had picked up the style, and local tailors eventually turned it into standard office wear. Bermuda remains one of the only places on Earth where shorts are considered acceptable formal business attire for men, worn not just by office staff, but by executives, government officials, members of parliament, and even the country's premier. Beyond the clothing, Bermuda holds on to an even more layered tradition: gombe. When the drums start up, dancers appear in vivid costumes topped with towering peacock feather headdresses, faces hidden behind masks, performing something you won't see replicated anywhere else. Behind the spectacle is a much heavier history. Gombe was created by enslaved Africans brought to Bermuda, a way of preserving cultural expression under brutal circumstances. The masks weren't for show. They hid the dancers' identities from slave owners who saw Gombe as a threat, to the point that the tradition was at times restricted to a single day a year, or banned outright. Today, Gombe is performed openly, a way for the community to hold on to and celebrate where it came from. Development never erased what makes this island distinct. Modern offices sit right beside centuries-old streets, and it's entirely normal for someone to spend the day working in global finance, then put on Bermuda shorts and join a Gombe performance once festival season arrives. Looking at Bermuda now, it's tempting to assume this is a place with no downsides at all. Pink beaches, glass-clear water, gleaming white roofs, a thriving economy. It reads like paradise. But daily life here carries real limitations that residents deal with constantly. Being a small island in open ocean means Bermuda can't be self-sufficient. Most essential goods have to be shipped in from elsewhere, which keeps the cost of living consistently high. Food, everyday supplies, nearly everything has to travel a long way to get there. Limited land creates its own set of problems too, making it genuinely hard to expand housing or build much of anything at scale. And then there's the biggest challenge of all: nature itself. Every hurricane season is a reminder of how tightly life here is tied to the ocean's moods, with storms capable of disrupting the entire island at once. Looking further ahead, rising sea levels are an increasingly real concern for a low-lying place like this. For the people who grew up here, though, Bermuda isn't just coordinates on a map. It's the roads they walked to school, the coastline tied to quiet afternoons, the white-roofed houses that sheltered their families for generations. Life on this island holds on to something that's grown rare almost everywhere else: genuine calm. And for them, home was never about being convenient. It's about belonging somewhere, hardships included. That's why so many Bermudians choose to stay. Not because the island is flawless, but because despite every limitation, it gives them the one thing that matters most: the feeling that this small piece of rock in the middle of the Atlantic is truly home. Bermuda may be small, but past the legends of the Triangle, past the pink beaches and the staggering wealth, what actually defines this place is the people who chose to stay connected to it. Because sometimes what makes somewhere valuable isn't its size or what it's sitting on. It's how deeply the people there love it, protect it, and call it home. That brings us to the end of our journey through Bermuda. Thanks for spending this time with us, exploring such a small island with such an enormous story. Subscribe, and we'll keep exploring extraordinary places together.